Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we're bringing you a review of The Godfather. This one's been a long time coming. Huge expectations for this one. This is Eric Lang's newest game from CMON Games, and it is finally here.
Right, finally here. And it's their first sort of big event type box thing that never went to Kickstarter either.
Interesting.
This thing's straight to retail. It is a Euro game through and through, in my opinion.
It is.
With a ton of theme, which we don't see a lot of. This is the kind of thing that Jeremy and I
I've been begging for a long time,
This is the kind of game we want. Theme and Euro.
Yeah, so we're going to walk you guys through the components, give you a brief rundown how the game plays, but if you want to know exactly how it plays, there's a great series called Tabletop Showcase from our friend Rodney Smith at Watch It Played, and a whole other list of reviewers who have some information about that. Go watch the Watch It Played series, but let's dig into it. You are a family within The Godfather, right? And you control a Don and you control thugs. And these thugs are going to be shaking down businesses, getting shady resources and turning those resources in for jobs, collecting money, and then banking those monies within a suitcase.
All through worker placement
Yes.
and area control, or turf control, as it were.
We have a 4-player game set up. Each player is going to start with a singular Don, and they're going to start with 2 thugs. Now, the great thing about these miniatures is they have bases on them that are either square or they're round. And that denotes where they can be placed. So all of your thugs can be placed on buildings, which will shake down the front of those buildings and gain you resources or job cards. And then your Dons will actually go into the circle areas, which will shake down all the businesses that are in the turfs that they touch.
Exactly. The family members don't want to get their hands dirty out in the front of the store. So they're pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Speaking of the board itself, you have 7 different areas, or turfs in this case. You're going to be controlling these areas, manipulating them to gain control. Now, on these turfs, you have tiles that are either actual physical tiles or they're pre-printed on here. Each of these represent areas that you can physically go to with your thugs and shake down to get resources.
Right, and what's cool about those too is they are the tiles that are randomly added to the board in specific locations, but it changes things up every time you play this game because different locations are going to be in different parts of the map.
That's right. You have allies across the bottom. You're going to play with the X number of allies, depending upon the number of players. These allies you'll be bribing, which is fantastic, through the course of the game, collecting them into your hand, which will take up one of the slots in your hand, but you'll be using these neutral characters to move around the board and enact certain abilities. Now, what's cool about the allies as well is that you don't physically own them.
You don't own the piece.
You don't own the piece. You're just manipulating them. So there can be instances where I manipulate the police chief, and then David could manipulate the police chief by playing a particular card.
Right.
You have jobs. This is the main meat of the game. You're going to be going out there and paying the resources that you've collected to enact either jobs that you have hidden in your hand.
And you start with 2 in your hand.
Or jobs that are public for people to see. There's going to be 3 jobs in every single round that are public, but once they are taken, they don't get replaced until the next round, which is really cool. When you complete a job, you basically get the money, and then you do whatever ability they have. And there's some mean ones like Car Bomb, which is absolutely
Car Bomb's one of my favorites.
Yes.
It's brutal. I mean, these things have different impacts, some of which impact some of the immediate worker placement aspect of the game. Car Bomb is one that impacts the area control for sure.
Absolutely. Everyone has 9 control markers. These will be used at a very particular portion of the game to mark areas that you control. What's neat about these as well is that once you place one of these on here, they'll never get removed. If someone controls the area later in the game, they just place theirs on top, and that's important for the end of the game. And you have money. Money is very important in this game. It's everything in the game, really.
It is everything.
You are trying to collect money, and not only collect money, but you're trying to bank it into your tin suitcase. You have denominations of 1, 2, 3, and 5. Now, these can't be broken up.
Nope, no change.
There's no change. If you have a $5 bill, you have to bank that $5 bill, and then also you might have to use that $5 bill to bribe.
Right, and you may be wondering, too, what's the harm in putting a $5 bill in here? Well, there are cards that allow people to kind of sneak in your briefcase and take some money. And if you've got a bunch of 5s, they're taking a lot of your money.
Let's talk about the game. To set up, everyone's going to start with a Don in a 4-player game and 2 thugs. And you're going to seed the board with tiles in all these blank spaces. And then over here, you have the different rounds. You're going to play 4 rounds in the game. Each of these rounds will do very particular things. They'll limit your hand control at the end of the round. They may introduce a new tile. They may allow players to get a second and then even a third Don. And then across the top of the board, you have all the different phases of the turn, and there's 5 phases within the game. The very first phase is opening a new business. So you're going to pull one of the new tiles, depending upon where it is, and place it on the board in the lowest numbered area.
Right.
And that just basically introduces a new place that can be shook down by the players.
Right, and the next phase of any round is really the meat and potatoes of the game.
Yep.
This is where, in player turn order, you're going to go around and you're going to be positioning either your thugs or your family members in the different positions on the board and reaping the rewards of where you place.
Yep.
When you place a thug in the front of the store, you're going to get some amount of resources and or money from the bottom of the tile.
Yep.
Now, if you place a family member in one of the points around an area, what's cool about this is you're going to be shaking down the back of the buildings from every adjacent area. So you're going to get a lot more things at once.
So in this case, this guy would get a suitcase action, which allows him to bank. He would get a free gun, he'd get $1, and then he'd get a job.
Right.
What's cool too is that each of these resources that you see here, there is money, there's guns, and then there's liquor. These are limited, and that's very important in the game because there can be parts in the game where you can't get the resources you need because other players are holding them in their hand.
Right. You might be looking at jobs that are available, and if there's no liquor available, you don't want, you want to look elsewhere for sure.
So not only can you place your thugs and your dons, but also during this second phase of the game, you can complete a job. So any of the jobs that are public that you have the resources to do, you can complete that, or any of the ones that you have here. And again, you enact the ability, and then you get whatever money is at the bottom. Any of the jobs that you complete go into your suitcase, because that's important, because each of these color-coded cards will give you victory points for having the most.
Right.
At the end of the game.
There's definitely a set collection there at the end of the game. Other thing about limitations, Jeremy mentioned that these resources are limited.
Yeah.
We also, I think we mentioned earlier on, your hand size is limited.
Yes.
And that hand size limitation changes throughout the game. The big problem with this is, and I mean that in the most beautiful of ways, is if you are stuck at the end of a round and you have a bunch of money in your hand,
and you haven't banked it,
you might have thought, oh, I did all these jobs and I have all this money. You're going to lose it unless you've got it in your suitcase because you have to discard down to a hand size.
The other very important thing that happens during phase 2 is you have a fourth option, and that is using one of your ally cards that you've collected. Now, these ally cards are very important. You have to use an ally card while you still have figures left.
Right.
It can't be the last thing you do on your turn. So you're going to have to utilize it before you use your last figure. And again, you just play that in front of you, and you move that particular ally on the board. What's great about the ally cards is they will actually come back to your hand. You can use them round after round. So the earlier that you acquire them, the more use out of them that you will get. But you'll be bidding away your victory points in order to get them.
Exactly. And let's talk about that bidding mechanic for a moment.
Yeah.
When the allies come up and it's time to bid for an ally, everyone takes money that's in their briefcase.
Yeah.
And you open your briefcase privately, you put some amount of money in the top of the briefcase.
Yeah.
When everyone's ready, you simply drop it down and see what everyone's bid.
Yep.
Highest bid gets their first pick,
Yep.
and so on and so forth.
Yep. Whoever bid least and doesn't get an ally actually gets to put that back into their bank. So that's the fourth phase. Coming backwards, we actually have the turf war, which is next. Once everybody has placed all of their figures on the board, you're simply going to count up whoever has majority in those particular areas, including your dons and including your thugs. So if I have 3 in this location and one other player only has 1 or 2, I would control that area. You're going to do that for each of the different areas within the game. The final step is you're going to, after you bribe, you have to do the tribute to the Don, and that's where you have to discard back down.
That tribute, it doesn't feel like a tribute. It feels like a devastating blow to your hand size for sure. But it is an integral part of this game.
Yep, and then the Don will move down. You'll introduce a new tile. Everybody will get a new guy, and all these will come back to you. Now, there's parts, too, in the game where your guys will get killed, which is really neat. Whenever they get killed, they get thrown into the Hudson River and turned on their side.
Swimming with the fishes.
Swimming with the fishes, and you will collect those back at the start of the next round. And you're going to keep doing this round after round with a new first player determined only by going to this very particular location and getting the severed horse head.
The horse head. It had to be the first player marker for sure.
And at the end of the game, you're going to get victory points for whoever has the most money, and then control locations, and then any of the cards that they have, whoever has the most of these type of cards. I have to say, this game is fantastic. I had very little expectations for this. I was worried, because a lot of their good games have been kickstarted.
Yeah, it was a different approach for them, sure.
Very
and I
different.
think that does oftentimes send a signal out that you're trying to interpret, like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But in this case, I have to agree. I kind of approach it the same way, but from a different angle. Whenever, as you know, whenever I approach or think of licensed games, I get a little weary.
Yep.
I'm like, I'm not sure. But this is an example where it's a beautiful combination of both. I mean, you've got Eric Lang, who, if you've heard him in some interviews, absolutely loves The Godfather.
He loves
like
the
it's,
IP.
It's one of his top 3 movies or something like that. So when he had the chance to do this, he jumped at it, and he's come up with an excellent game. It also doesn't hinge on knowing The Godfather, which is miraculous. You're really just a mafia-type family trying to take control, but it's set in this great universe.
Yeah, before I sing all my praises, I will mention one thing that I don't like. I love the art style in the game. I don't like the graphic design on the resource cards, nor do I like the graphic design on the job cards. That's a personal opinion of mine. That's what I don't like. I don't like these solid borders. I think they look dated. I think the job cards look dated. However, having said that, there's a lot of good things about this game. Number one, there are a ton of choices. Every single round that you are in the game, you have a variety of different things that you can do. That's by placing your guy and deciding which of these places either to shake down the fronts, if you want to control a region, if you want to use job cards. And it all revolves around timing. I love games where you are trying to get the best timing out of all of your actions. This game is nothing but timing. You have to play your cards, you have to play your jobs, you have to use your thugs, you have to use your dons at very specific times to get the most out of them. And that's fantastic in this game.
Well, and plus, when it comes to timing, things like the ally cards and the jobs specifically, those are the things that can really come out to bite people from a timing standpoint. Because for a while, you're sitting here, when you're not really building up and doing jobs in the first round, there's not a lot of that going on. Everyone gets into sort of some complacency of like, well, I'll go here, 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 and it looks like I've got control of this area. And then all of a sudden, I finish a job that's a car bomb. It blows a bunch of people out of that area, and I've still got two people to place.
You're going to be sitting good.
So I'm gonna sweep in there and take control.
Yeah, the other great things too is I love variability in games that I play. This has tiles. You're not always going to be playing the same tiles. You have a resource called drugs. This may or may not come into the game, but it's a wild resource.
Yeah, the narcotics, they come in as a wild later in the game, for sure.
You have a ton of different allies. Which allies come in, you never know. That's going to change the game. The jobs that not only do you draft at the start of the game, but the ones that are public are always going to change. So there's always going to be variety, not to mention how people play the game, how they approach the game, what turfs they decide to go to. So you're constantly having to think on the fly. The other great thing is it doesn't take a lot of time to play, which is surprising. This is going to be compared a lot to Rising Sun. I think it's going to be compared a lot to Blood Rage for the simple fact that all 3 of those games are area control games.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I love Blood Rage. If you guys watched our top 10, that was on my top 10. I think this is a better game. And the reason why I think it's a better game is because it's far less swingy. You don't have those point differences where one player could have 15 points and one could have 200 and some. It just doesn't happen in this game.
Well, and I haven't seen either, we've played it just a few times, but I haven't seen anyone, no situation starts where you're like, oh, you're doing that again.
Yes.
Like, it's going to be fresh every time because there's so, like you said, all those variables that are going on. There's no way that you can kind of just sit back and go, I'm going to use that same exact thing that I did last time.
Yeah.
I mean, you can try, but there's too many variables on the table to make that work.
I also like to take that aspect of this game. I like any kind of game that has a little bit of that. It is a nasty game. But you have to agree that when we played this, it was humorous. It was fun. It was enjoyable kind of take that. You're getting destroyed, especially when you get card bombed. But it's a fun experience. It's very thematic. It makes sense in the game.
It's the theme that helps that. I mean, once you've embraced the fact that you're doing what you're doing here theme-wise, when you know car bombs around the corner. One thing that we didn't really do, I was thinking about this the other day, is the whole concept of even potentially a little bit of bluffing going on. Because you could maybe even drop hints that you have a car bomb, or you have certain jobs in your hand. And if you're lying, you could still scare people away from operating the way they thought they might.
Absolutely.
If you think I have a car bomb, you might change your strategy. So once people around the table know the cards, you can really get into each other's heads.
Once you get car bombed once, you know what not to do anymore, especially if they start collecting these guns here. Fantastic game. This is one of my favorite Eric Lang games. If you guys are interested at all, go check it out. Make comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, and everything else that we do, and catch us next time.
Bye-bye.
Season 1 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored by our friends at TMG Games. And at Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com.